Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. So today we are from group 4. We are presenting about an deep group analysis of Malaysian occupational safety and health legislation, transition from OSHA 1994 and FMA 1967 to OSHA Act 2022 and application to a recent major industrial incident. So our group consists of 15 members. This is our all members that contribute in our group project, industrial safety and health. Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is Muhammad Afif bin Muhammad Azlan and my matric number is 223243. So I will presenting about introduction of our safety project. So I will start with historical context and the dual track system, which is the first is the two pillars. The historically mentioned was managed by the Factory and Machinery Act, which is FMA 1967, and the Occupational Safety and Health Act, which is OSHA 1998. Next is FMA 1967, focus on predominantly prescriptive, emphasize technical safety of specific hardware like boilers and lifting equipment. And next is OSHA 1994, focus on introduce a self-regulation model, shifting safety responsibility from the state to firms and employees. And lastly is the need for change is the diversification of the Malaysian workforce and modern industrial processes reveal gaps and overlaps between these two separate laws. Okay, next I will introduce to you guys about the OSHA Amendment Act 2022 reform. So the first of the OSHA Act 2022 reform is the landmark reform, which is to enforce, to modernize and integrate different standards into a single and unified framework. So next is a key structural change, which is they repeal the FMA 1967 and significantly expanded the jurisdiction of OSHA 1994. So next is core philosophy of the OSHA is to move forward a universal duty of care that applies to all workplaces in Malaysia without exception. And lastly is enhanced accountability is to introduce legal responsibilities for a broader range of duty holders, including designers, manufacturers and principals.
My name is Nur Satin Azman. My matric number is SA00248. I'm going to present the overview and key provision of Occupational Safety and Health 1994. This was the first major law that really focused on workplace safety in our country. What's important to understand is that this law created a shared responsibility system, meaning employers, employee and the government all have to work together to keep the workers safe. The main purpose of OSHA 1994 was to protect the safety, health and welfare of workers, but here's what made it different from just having government inspectors. It promoted something called self-regulation. This means employers and employees had to share responsibility for safety, not just rely on the government to enforce it. The Act created two important bodies. First, there's the National Council for Occupational Safety and Health, which advises the government on safety policy. Second, there's the Department of Occupational Safety and Health, which actually inspect workplace and enforce the rule. Now, the original Act did have some limitation. It only covers certain industry like construction and manufacturing, so not all workers were protected at first, and the penalty for violation were not strong enough to really discourage company from breaking the rule. But despite these weaknesses, OSHA 1994 was a major milestone for workplace safety in Malaysia. It was a turning point in how we approach occupational safety and health. For employers, they have several important duties. They must ensure the workplace is safe and healthy. They need to provide proper supervision and training to their workers. They are required to create written safety policy. And if the company has 40 or more employees, they must form a safety and health committee. These are not optional, they are legal requirements. For employees, their responsibilities are simpler but important. Employees must take care of their own safety, they must follow workplace safety rules, and they must use safety equipment properly. The law recognizes that you can have safety without both the employer and employee working together. On the enforcement side, those officers are responsible for inspecting workplace and investigating accidents. If a company violates the Act, The penalty are serious up to 50,000 ringgit in fine and or imprisonment for up to 2 years. This penalty show that the government take workplace safety seriously.
My name is Nashifah Labin Ismail. My matric number is 22607. So I represent section 15, which is employer studies. Now let's focus on section 15, which cover the general duties of employers. This is important because it sets out exactly what employers are responsible for. Employers must do four main things, which is first, they must ensure the workplace is safe and healthy for all employers. Second, they must provide safe equipment and work system. Third, they need to ensure that hazardous substances and materials are handled and transported safely. Fourth, employees must provide the training and supervision that workers need to do their job safely. And let me give you some example. Say a company buys a crane for their construction site. The employer doesn't just need to make sure that the crane is mechanically sound and safe to use, and they also need to make sure that whoever operates that crane is properly certified and trained. Equipment plus training equally safety, and the key for this principle here is a safe equipment means nothing if the operators doesn't know how to use it properly. So this slide about section 17. Section 17 is interesting because it extends employer responsibility beyond just their own employees. This is a significant shift in thinking. Under this section, employers must be protect not only the workers but also the general public, visitors and contractors who might be affected by their works. Basically, employers cannot just focus on keeping the employees safe, but they have to make sure that they are not creating hazard for anyone else. Let me give you a real example that's common here in Malaysia. Imagine a shop is being renovated inside a busy shopping mall. The contractor is responsible for their own workers, of course, but they also have to think about the shoppers walking around. They need to put up hoarding around the construction site so that the shoppers doesn't trip over cables or get hit by falling debris. They might need warning sign too. This is the point is your safety responsibility extends beyond your company, kids to everyone affected what you are doing. In this section is section 24, which is the employee studies. While employers have a major responsibilities, employees have important duties too. This section 24 make clear that the safety is a shared responsibility. Employees cannot just wait for their employers to make everything safe. So employees must take reasonable care for their own safety and the safety of other people at work. They have to cooperate with their employers on safety matters and follow safety procedures. And here's a practical one. If you are employers, provide protective equipment like a helmet, gloves, safety goggles, or respiratory equipment. You are legally required to use it properly. Not wearing PPE when it's provided or wearing it incorrectly, it is actually a violation of your duties under the Act. The key message here is that safety is not one way. The employers cannot force safety on the employees. If the employees do not actively participate, both sides have to work together to create a safe workplace.
Hi, my name is Irene Shabila and my matric number is 23617. So now let's talk about how the Act is actually enforced. Section 31 gives those inspectors significant power and authority. Inspectors can enter workplace without notice, meaning surprise inspections can happen anytime. They can take measurements, photographs, and samples to document conditions. They can demand that companies produce documents and safety records. They can interview the workers, the management to gather information. And when they find violations, they can issue improvement notices and directions that companies must follow. The reason inspectors have these broad powers is because their job is to investigate accidents and dangerous incidents, investigate complaints from workers, and gather evidence to support enforcement actions. Having these powers allows them to actually enforce the Act and make sure the companies are complying with their safety duties. Finally, let's discuss on something that directly affects the places. The requirement to report accidents and dangerous occurrences, this is covered in Section 39. Companies must report certain accidents. This include death and serious injuries at work, dangerous incidents that could have caused the injury, and if they didn't, and work-related diseases. When reporting, companies must use the prescribed JKP forms and submit the report within 48 hours of the incident. 48 hours might seem strict, but there's a reason for it. So the requirement for to report quickly serve three important purposes. First, it allows those officers to investigate the incidents while evidence is still fresh and people's memories are still clear. Second, it gives the government the visibility of into the safety problems. They can see the patterns of non-compliance and take action. Third, companies must keep this record for a minimum of 7 years, which creates a documented history of their safety performance. This system prevents companies from hiding incidents and allows regulators to identify problems before they become worse.
Hello everyone, my name is Gur Simmer Singh and my matrix number is 222465. My presentation focused on the Factories and Machinery Act 1967, or also known as FMA 1967. So, as the title suggests, this act served as the foundation of industrial safety regulations in Malaysia for over 50 years, especially supporting Malaysia's era of rapid industrialization. So how FMA 1967 works is it uses a prescriptive framework, meaning it provided a rigid, specific rules that factories had to follow to be in compliance. The primary focus of FMA 1967 is firstly structural integrity of manufacturing buildings, the technical safety of the machinery within them, and the welfare of individuals working there. However, in comparison to the later OSHA 1994, the FMA was more constrained. It did not cover every worker in Malaysia. It applied to strictly to registered businesses and specific high-risk apparatus.
So moving on to the 5 operational pillars or operational framework of FMA 1967. Firstly is registration. A mandatory permission to operate protocol was enforced, which requires formal notification before starting any factory operations. Next is licensing. Strict control over high-risk machinery like steam boilers and lifting equipment was done by having a certificate of fitness for the operators to ensure that they are fit to operate such equipment. Next is occupier duties. This was important to place legal responsibilities on the party in control of the factory. This was also important to ensure safety and compliance. The fourth point is technical standards. This is important to mandating rigid engineering requirements for machinery design and installation to ensure no faulty equipment or machinery was used. Lastly is individual welfare. Prescribing basic health and sanitation standards such as ventilation, lighting, drinkable water is also important for the operational framework of FMA 1967. Moving on, we'll be talking about the compliance and machinery certificates. So for this part, on this slide we can see the specific legal provisions that enforce these compliance. Under the permission to operate regime that we discussed in the previous slide, we see the specific requirements. Firstly, we'll be looking at the factory notification that focuses on the legal provision section 34. Here, it requires the submission of Form JKJ 101 at least 1 month before a factory begins operations. Next, for the construction, or also known as BOWEC, which the full form is Building, Operations and Works of Engineering Constructions. So this comes under the legal provision of Building Ops, and this requires Form JKJ 103 to be submitted within 7 days of projects lasting more than 6 weeks. Next is machinery approval. This comes under the legal provision of Section 36, where that mandated that even installing machinery required prior written approval via Form JKJ 105. And finally, Section 19 deals with high-risk certification. Equipments like steam boilers required a certificate of fitness, which followed a rigorous 15-month inspection cycle. Crucially, operating without a certificate of fitness was a strict liability offence. This meant the owner was liable regardless of intent, emphasizing the Act's goal of preventing equipment from being a time bomb or something that will cause major injury.
On this slide, we focus on duty of employer, specifically the responsibility of the occupier, meaning the person or organization with ultimate control over the factory operation. First, employers are responsible for machinery safety, including the ensure machines are properly constructed, well maintained, and that all dangerous moving parts are adequately guarded to prevent the injury. Next is structural safety. Employer must maintain safety routine, including the strong floor, proper lighting, and good ventilation, and effective drainage system to ensure a safe working environment. They are also responsible for waiver provision such as providing the clean drinking water, washing facilities, sanitary convenience, proper clothing storage, and first aid facility. These are basic need that support the worker healthy and dignity. Another key duty is certification. Certain machinery must be registered with OSHA and have a valid certificate of fitness, which is ensure the equipment meet safety standard. In the event of serious accident, employer must carry out accident reporting by informing a DOS within the stipulated time frame. Importantly, this responsibility are not delegable, meaning occupier cannot transfer this duty to subcontractor or third party. They remain full accountable. However, there was a limitation under this law where the duty did not extend to design, manufacture, or supply. This gap was later addressed under the OSHA 222, which is expanded responsibility across the entire safety chains. So next.
Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. My name is Muhammad Haziq bin Sarudin. My matrix number is 224264. So for this slide, I will explain about the safety requirement for machinery and plant. So under the Factories and Machinery Act, all machinery must be built safely, well maintained and free from defects. So all the equipment must always be in a good working condition. So the first one is all moving or dangerous parts must be guarded to prevent the accident. So the material that could be harmful must be handled safely. So next is about the safety compliance. In the section 17 and 18, strictly prohibit using or repairing machinery does not meet safety standards. So the second one is the high-risk machinery must obtain a certificate of fitness before it can operate. So next, what is the main objective? The main objective is to make sure the machinery is safe, properly inspected and approved. This will help to reduce the accident and protect the workers. Okay, this slide will focus on the welfare facilities that employer must provide. So under the Act 1967, the worker must have proper clothing storage, sufficient clean drinking water, and washing facilities, also the first aid. So for the drinking water, it must be safe, clean, and always available. For the washing facilities, they must be enough and well maintained. And the first aid facilities also required. If there are more than 150 employees, the first aid room must be provided. In the section 22, also require employers to provide a proper toilet and sanitation. So these welfare facilities help to ensure workers' hygiene, health, and overall well-being.
So this slide explains how the Factory and Machinery Act 1967 was enforced and what penalty apply. Enforcement were carried out by DOSH appointed inspector who had a legal authority to enter the factory, examine the machinery, investigate accident, and demand safety certificate and official record. There were several enforcement mechanisms. First, improvement notice were issued for non-dangerous violation that require correction within the given time. Second, a prohibition notice were used in situation or imminent danger where work has to stop immediately until the risk was resolved. For serious or repeated violation, prosecution could be taken against the employers. In terms of penalty, the maximum fine was 10,000, imprisonment of up to 1 year, and additionally, daily fine is non-compliance continuous. However, the law also receives a several criticism. The penalty was considered too low to deter larger organizations. Inspector resources were limited, which is led to more reactive rather than a proactive enforcement. And there was little incentive for company to invest in the long-term safety improvement. This awareness later became the key reason for legal reform and the introduction of stronger safety regulation such as OSHA 222. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Hello, class. My name is Corneliusen, and my matrix number is 225540. And now, me and my roommates will be presenting section 3 of this assignment, which is OSH Amendment Act of 2022, Enhancement and Integration. And in this section, we will be presenting about the rationale for the 2022 amendment, key enhancements under this act, and also the incorporation of another act, the Factories and Machinery Act of 1967, elements into OSHA 2022. So now I will be presenting about the rationale for the 2022 Amendment Act. So why was this act amended? It is to strengthen and modernize Malaysia's OSH legal framework, and it addressed changes in workplace conditions, technology and work practices, and it also improves protection of workers' safety, health and welfare. So here are some key legislative change. The OSH Amendment Act was passed in 2022 but only taking full effect on the 1st of June 2024, and the Factories and Machinery Act of 1967 was revoked, and its provisions were integrated into the 2022 Act, and the OSH regulations are consolidated under one comprehensive law. So the overall objective of this Amendment Act was to create a single integrated OSH legislation that applies consistently across workplaces. By doing so, the government aimed to strengthen enforcement mechanisms and improve compliance across all industries rather than limiting protection to certain sectors only. Under the previous OSH Act of 1994, there were several key limitations. Firstly, the Act only covered prescribed industries, meaning that many sectors were excluded from the statutory OSH protection, and as a result, workers in those sectors faced higher risk without adequate legal safeguards. Secondly, the penalties and enforcement provisions were considered insufficient to deter non-compliance. This weakened employers' accountability in maintaining safe and healthy workplaces. And finally, there was noticeable increase in workplace accidents and occupational diseases, highlighting the need for a stronger legislation. There is a change of nature of work that contributed to the 2022 Amendment Act. So over the recent years, there has been significant growth in non-traditional work arrangements, such as outsourcing and subcontracting, gig economy, and remote working. These forms of work were not fully addressed under the earlier OSH 1994 Act framework, which created gaps in worker protection. At the same time, there has been increased awareness of emerging workplace risks, which includes ergonomic risks, which arise from prolonged computer use and poor workstation design, and also psychological and mental health hazards such as work-related stress and burnout. In the response to these changes, the 2022 Amendment Act introduced several key improvements. Most importantly, OSHA now applies to all workplaces in Malaysia, covering both public and private sectors, including small, medium enterprises. And the amendment also clearly defines responsibilities and duties not only for employers but also for principals engaging contractors and for self-employed persons. This ensures shared accountability for occupational safety and health, regardless of the arrangement.
Building on the earlier rationale and changing nature of work, the 2022 Amendment Act also places strong emphasis on employee protection. Under the amended Act, employees are given the right to remove themselves from situations of imminent danger without fear of punishment, which empowers workers to prioritize safety over productivity. The amendment also provides protection against discrimination and retaliation, ensuring that workers are not penalized for reporting hazards or raising safety concerns. Most importantly, it encourages active worker participation in occupational safety and health matters. Employees are no longer passive recipients of safety rules, but active contributors to a safer workplace.
My name is Anson and my matrix number is 225351. So I'm going to talk about a key enhancement under OSHA Amendment Act 2022. So the first key improvement under the OSHA Amendment Act 2022 is the creation of one clear and unified safety law. In the past, workplace safety was controlled by two different laws. The first one is the OSHA 1994 and the second one is the Factory and Machinery Act 1967. Because this law had different scope, this sometimes caused confusion, repeated inspection, and delay. With the amendment, the older machinery law has been removed and all safety and machinery requirements are now combined under OSHA. This makes the rules easier to understand and easier to enforce. The next improvement is wider coverage. The old law mainly focused on factory and certain industry, but today, work does not always happen inside factory. Many people work in office, construction sites, shop, delivery service, and even from home. The amended OSHA now applies to all workplaces in Malaysia, whether public or private, big or small. This means that more workers are protected by the law and safety is no longer limited by industry type or location. Another major improvement is the expansion of responsibility. Previously, most legal duties were placed on employers and workers at the workplace. However, many safety issues actually start before equipment reach the work site, such as during the design or manufacturing stage. Under the amendment, designer, manufacturer, importer, and supplier now also have legal duties. This means they must make sure their machine, tools, or system are safe before they use or sold it. This change helped prevent unsafe products from entering the workplace in the first place. This law also introduced stronger enforcement. In the past, the penalty for breaking safety rules were not very high, and some companies treated them as a normal course of doing business. The amendment increased fines and other punishment to make sure companies take safety seriously. Stronger penalty encourage better planning, better training, and better safety control, which help reduce accident and protect workers. The final improvement is the shift towards risk-based safety management. Instead of only following fixed rules and waiting for accident to happen, the amended law encouraged workplace to identify hazard early, assess the level of risk, and take steps to control those risks before starting work. This approach is proactive rather than reactive. Risk-based management fits well with the modern industry where work processes, technology, and tools change quickly. By identifying hazard and planning control in advance, company can prevent many injuries and incidents. This approach also improves safety culture because worker and employers think about safety as part of the daily work, not just when something goes wrong. Overall, these improvements help Malaysia move towards a more preventive and forward-looking safety system.
My name is Teo Chuan An and my matrix number is 223504. Now I'll be explaining about how elements of the Factory and Machinery Act or FMA 1967 were incorporated into the Occupational Safety and Health Act 2022. Firstly, under the OSHA Amendment Act 2022, the Factory and Machinery Act 1967 was officially repealed. This repeal represents a major restructuring of Malaysia's occupational safety and health legislation. However, it is important to note that this does not mean machinery safety requirements were removed. In fact, the core principle of the FMA 1967 were retained and further strengthened. The key machinery and factory safety requirements that previously exist under the FMA have now been fully integrated into OSHA 2022. This ensures that machinery safety continues to be regulated, but under a single, more comprehensive legal framework. The integration was necessary because previously Malaysia operated under a dual act system. OSHA 1994 focused on general occupational safety and health management, while FMA 1967 governed technical machinery and factory rules. This separation often caused enforcement overlap and administrative confusion for both regulators and employers. With the introduction of OSHA 2022, this issue has been addressed by providing one unified legal framework. This integration improves clarity, strengthens enforcement, and ensures a more holistic approach to occupational safety and health, including machinery and factory operation. So one of the most critical elements inherited from the repeal FMA 1967 into the OSHA Amendment Act 2022 is the regulation of machinery safety. Under the old FMA, requirements were highly prescriptive and location-centric. Essentially, safety rules primarily apply only if the machinery was located within a defined factory boundary. This created a major gap. If a dangerous machine was used outside of a factory setting, the regulation often didn't apply effectively. The 2022 amendment fixes this. By repealing the FMA and integrating its requirement into a single, unified framework, machinery safety now applies to all workplaces, regardless of where they are. We have moved away from rigid boundaries to a risk-based approach, preserving the technical intent of the original law while making it much more effective for the modern world. Because we are now using a risk-based approach, the scope of responsibility has significantly expanded. It is no longer just about the person operating the machine. As you can see now, the Act now places specific legal duties on employers, occupiers, designers, manufacturers, and suppliers. This ensures that safety is managed throughout the entire life cycle of the machinery, from the initial design phase all the way to its daily use. By involving everyone from the designer to the supplier, we ensure that safety is regulated from the start, significantly expanding the law's applicability and protecting workers at every stage.
Hello, my name is Eugene Lim Zhentao. My matrix number is 224560. So now I'll be talking about the inspection and certification. When moving forward, another critical feature retained from the FMA 1967 is the inspection and certification process. Previously, high-risk machinery like boilers, hoisting machines require a certificate of fitness, also known as CF, which is usually exclusively issued by DOSH officers itself. The OSHA 2032 amendment preserves this vital verification process under Section 27A. This is to ensure the technical integrity of equipment remains a top and legal priority. However, to address previous constraints in enforcement capacities, the Act usually introduces a major change under Section 7A, which is also the licensed person. These new provisions allows qualified private parties to conduct inspections and issue certificates. This shift reduces the operational burden on DOSH itself while maintaining strict regulatory oversight, making the certification process more efficient without compromising safety itself, making it quite efficient. Other than that, for this side, I'll be mainly talking about the occupier responsibility. For this side, mainly I will be explaining how occupier responsibility has evolved from FMA 1967 to OSHA 2022. Under the Factory and Machinery Act 1967, occupiers were the main parties responsible for machinery and workplace safety. The focus was largely limited to conditions in factories, meaning safety responsibility were concentrated on the occupier alone. However, the OSHA 2022, this responsibility have been enhanced and expanded, while employers and occupiers remain key duty holders, and safety responsibility is no longer just limited to them. It now extends to other parties such as designers, manufacturers, suppliers, and so on. This shift reflects a more comprehensive approach to safety, where everyone is involved in providing designing or supplying machinery has a role to play in ensuring a safe workplace, making the entire thing more rounded. Now I'll be talking about the life cycle-based duty sharing, where building on that, OSHA 2022 introduces the concept of life cycle-based duty sharing, where safety responsibility is now distributed across all parties throughout the entire life cycle of machinery and workplace activities. This means hazards are addressed not only during workplace use, but also at design stage and manufacturing stages. By sharing responsibility across these stages, the reliance on occupiers alone is reduced. At the same time, preventive control is strengthened as risks are identified and managed earlier on before they reach the workplace, which reduces a lot more accidents. Overall, this approach creates a safer and more productive safety system, where risks are controlled from the very beginning rather than only after the incidents occur, making it a very good act and implementation.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, salam berilmu bakti. My name is Ahmad Ghazali bin Ahmad Kamil with the matric number 224119. So today we'll be going to be presenting regarding Section 4, the application of OSHA Amendment Act 2022 to a recent major industrial incident. So there are 4 agendas that we're going to cover. First of all is regarding the incident background, the analysis using the pre-2022 framework, the analysis using OSHA Amendment Act 2022, as well as the comparative discussion between the other acts as well. So now let us go through the incident background that we've covered in this section. So what happened was a fatal incident during a piling operation where on the 24th of April 2025 at a Rawang construction site, a worker was fatally struck by a falling concrete pile that became unstable during hoisting. So during the incident, there were unsafe incident sequence where the pile actually rolled off the hoisting hook while the pile was being lifted. So the operator himself tried to escape by jumping from his cabin. However, he was hit and later died from his injuries. Then, in response, the Selangor Department of Occupational Safety and Health (DOSH) actually issued a probation order in order to preserve the scene and a prohibition notice to halt all piling operations until safety could be assured. So this is the immediate enforcement action that were done in response to the incident that happened. So early findings actually suggested that there was a failure to properly identify, assess, and control the hazards, especially related to lifting and piling operations. So this is where we identified the failure, where one of the earlier signs was in hazard management. So next is the DOSH. After deeper research, they highlighted the need for an effective hazard identification, risk assessment, and risk control, which is the HIRAC program, in order to comply with such high risk construction tasks, like such as this, regarding the concrete pile operation itself. So this incident actually raised concerns from the public itself, where they actually question whether the construction sites in Malaysia are actually safe and whether the employees are actually fulfilling their duty to provide a safe working environment. So the case that at hand causes the public to be concerned over our workplace safety in Malaysia itself.
Next, we will be talking about the analysis using pre-work 2022 framework. It is separated into five. So the first one will be to separate laws govern workplace safety. Malaysia used the Occupational Safety and Health Act 1994, OSHA 1994 for general worker safety, and the Factory and Machinery Act 1967, FMA 1967 for machinery safety. The second one is OSHA 1994 placed general duties on employers. Employers had to ensure safe systems, equipment, training, and supervision. Failure to comply could lead to fines or prosecution. Third one is OSHA 1994 lacked detailed technical standards for high risk work. Without specific rules for activities like piling, employers often did risk assessment but didn't always implement proper control measures. The fourth one is FMA 1967 regulated machinery registration and inspection, where machines like piling equipment had to be registered, inspected, and certified for safe physical condition. FMA 1967 did not cover unsafe work practices. That's the fifth analysis, where even with certified machinery, accidents could still happen due to human errors, poor procedures, or lack of supervision. And lastly, we have enforcement was reactive and fragmented, where the two acts work separately, leading to gaps in preventing accidents, as shown in the Rawang incident.
Hello, my name is Muhammad Fikri, matrix number 224257. So in this section, I will explain the key changes introduced under OSHA Amendment Act 2022 and how this amendment strengthen workplace safety, particularly in construction and machinery related work. So first, the amendment introduced a new principal duty under section 18A. Under this section, the main contractor, also known as the principal, is now legally responsible for the safety of all subcontractors working under them. This means that the principal can no longer avoid liability by blaming the subcontractors in the event of an accident, as in cases like the Rawang incident. Next, Section 18B makes risk assessment mandatory. Conducting HIRAC, which stands for Hazard Identification, Risk Assessment and Risk Control, is now a legal requirement before starting any work. So now it is no longer just a guideline. So for example, failing to properly assess risks such as the load instability would now be considered as a direct violation of the law. Third, the amendment clarifies the machinery safety. Although the old Factories and Machinery Act 1967 was repealed, its machinery safety rules were retained and strengthened under OSHA. So this means that the equipment such as piling machine would still require a certificate of fitness before operation to ensure that they are safe to use. Fourth, the machinery inspection process has now been improved. Inspection can now be carried out by a certified private inspectors, also known as the licensed person. This change will allow inspection to be done faster, easier, and more efficiently without having to wait for government offices while still maintaining safety standards. Fifth, penalties for violation have now been significantly increased. For offence leading to death, fines can now reach up to 500,000 ringgit compared to 50,000 ringgit previously, and now it is may also include imprisonment of up to 2 years. And finally, these amendments create a clearer enforcement and accountability. There is now a more defined chain of responsibility from the principal to subcontractors. Combined with stricter penalties, this will encourage the companies to take workplace safety more seriously and implement proper safety measures.
Hello everyone, my name is Ahmad Haidar bin Muhammad Shu'ah. My matric number is 224905. Okay, in this section, I will briefly compare the pre-2022 safety framework with the OSHA Amendment Act 2022 and explain why the new framework is more effective in improving workplace safety. First, in terms of structure, the pre-2022 system was fragmented and reactive. Safety was governed by two separate laws, OSHA 1994 for people and management and FMA 1967 for machinery. This separation created gaps in enforcement and responsibility. The 2022 amendment introduced a unified and proactive framework where machinery management and work process are covered under one integrated law. This makes safety management clearer and more consistent. Next, for the focus of incident investigation, the old framework was often too narrow. Investigation mainly focused on machinery compliance, such as whether the machinery had valid certification, while management and supervision failures were sometimes ignored. Under the new framework, investigations are holistic. They consider machinery safety, supervision, risk assessment, and contractor management together, helping to identify the real causes of accidents. Regarding of the chain reliability, the pre-22 system was unclear. Main contractors could shift responsibility to subcontractors, creating a lack of accountability. With the introduction of the principal's duty under Section 18A, the 2022 amendment clearly places responsibility and main contractor for safety of all workers, including the subcontractors. This improves coordination and safety control on site. For risk assessment or hierarchy, HIRARC, previously it was mainly guideline based and not strictly enforced, leading to inconsistent application. Now, under Section 18B, this assessment is a mandatory legal requirement. Employers must identify hazards and control risks before work begins, which helps prevent the accident more effectively. In terms of penalties, the old framework had relatively low fines, with a maximum RM50,000, which some companies did not take seriously. The new amendment increases the maximum fine to RM500,000, creating a strong financial motivation for companies to prioritize safety. Overall, the pre-2022 framework was limited in prevention due to its reactive nature. In contrast, the OSHA Amendment Act 2022 is far more effective as it promotes proactive risk management, clear responsibility, and stronger enforcement to prevent workplace safety. And last but not least, I will present about the conclusion of our safety project. So, Malaysian Occupational Safety and Health Framework has tradition from a fragmented dual legislative system under the Factory and Machinery Act 1967 and OSHA 1994 to a unified risk-based regime through the Occupational Safety and Health Act 2022. This history reform repealed the prescriptive FMA 1967 and expanded OSHA's jurisdiction to all workplace in gradation technical machinery safety with a proactive duty of care philosophy. By holding a broader range of duty holders accountable, including designers and manufacturers, and significantly increasing deterrent penalties, the new framework provides a more robust mechanism for preventing accident and ensuring the holistic welfare of the modern Malaysian workforce. Thank you.